My name is Earl Matthews, and at 35 years old, I never imagined I would be treated like an unwelcome stranger by my own family. For 5 years, I had been married to Jessica Williams, daughter of the prestigious Williams clan, believing I had finally found acceptance. Our annual Hamptons vacation was supposed to be a time of connection and relaxation. Instead, I found myself literally seated at a separate table, watching my wife laugh with her family, while I sat alone in silence. What happened next would change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when nobody else will. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood in Pittsburgh, where my father worked at the steel mill and my mother taught elementary school. We were comfortable, but certainly not wealthy. From an early age, I showed an aptitude for computers, spending weekends building and programming while other kids played sports. That dedication paid off when I earned a scholarship to MIT, where I graduated with honors in computer science. By 30, I had worked my way up through several tech startups to become a senior software engineer at Vertex Solutions in Boston. I had built a good life for myself through sheer determination and hard work. I owned a modest condo in Cambridge, had a solid group of friends, and was proud of what I had accomplished on my own merit. I met Jessica at a charity gala where my company had donated our services. I was there troubleshooting the event management software when she approached me about a glitch in the donation system. Jessica was stunning in every sense of the word. Tall, elegant, with honey blonde hair, and a warm laugh that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. She was finishing her MBA at Harvard and volunteering with the charity organization. We connected instantly over our shared love of classic films and hiking. Our first date was coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into walking along the Charles River until sunrise. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Jessica was brilliant, ambitious, and seemed to appreciate my straightforward nature. When I proposed a year later, her yes felt like the beginning of everything I had ever wanted. It was only when she took me to meet her parents that I began to understand the world she came from. The Williams family lived in a historic mansion in Beacon Hill, with a summer home in the Hamptons and a winter retreat in Aspen. Harold Williams was the CEO of a multinational investment firm his grandfather had founded. Margaret Williams chaired 3 major charity boards and came from an even wealthier banking family. They had raised their children Jessica, Thomas, and Audrey to continue their legacy of wealth, influence, and carefully cultivated social connections. Our first meeting was civil but cold. Harold asked pointed questions about my family background and seemed unimpressed by my career achievements. Margaret commented that it was unusual that Jessica had brought someone home, with a tone suggesting I should feel honored by the rare invitation. I noticed how Jessica seemed to shrink in their presence. Her usual confidence diminished. Over the next few years, I tried everything to win their approval. I worked harder at my job, securing promotions and bonuses. I studied wine to keep up with Harold's extensive knowledge. I took golf lessons to join their weekend games. I even hired a consultant to help me understand the unwritten rules of old money etiquette. Nothing seemed to make a difference. Thomas, Jessica's older brother, was particularly dismissive. As a partner at a prestigious investment bank, he seemed to view my tech career as trendy and insubstantial. Audrey, the younger sister, who worked as an interior designer for wealthy clients, was politely distant, often forgetting to include me in family conversations. There were countless small humiliations at family gatherings. I would be seated at the far end of the table at Thanksgiving. Christmas gifts for me would be generic, while others received thoughtful, personal presents. My opinions on current events would be politely acknowledged, then swiftly dismissed. Through it all, Jessica would assure me, "They just need time to get to know you." Or, "They are like this with everyone at first." But 4 years into our marriage, nothing had changed. If anything, the subtle exclusion had become more pronounced. Still, I held on to hope that this year's annual family vacation at the exclusive Ocean View Resort might be different. Jessica and I had been working through some rough patches, and I thought this trip could be a fresh start for all of us. I prepared meticulously. I bought a new wardrobe that would fit the resort's dress code without looking like I was trying too hard. I took refresher golf lessons and practiced my swing daily. I researched the wine list at the resort restaurants and memorized tasting notes. I even prepared conversation topics that might interest Harold and Margaret based on recent financial news and charity events. Most importantly, I had splurged on an anniversary gift for Jessica, a platinum bracelet with sapphires that matched her eyes, hidden in my suitcase for the perfect moment. After 5 years together, I wanted to remind her of what we had built together, separate from her family's influence. As we drove to the Hamptons in our new Audi, another attempt to fit into their world, Jessica seemed happy and relaxed. She held my hand across the console and talked about swimming in the ocean and reading books on the beach. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that this vacation might be the turning point in my relationship with the Williams family. "Earl, I think this is going to be our best trip yet," Jessica said, squeezing my hand. "Everyone has been so busy that it will be nice to really connect." I smiled back at her, holding on to that fragile hope, not knowing that in less than 24 hours, I would be sitting alone at a separate table, watching that hope shatter before my eyes. The Ocean View Resort was everything Jessica had described and more. Situated on a pristine private beach, the white colonial-style buildings gleamed in the summer Sunday. Immaculate gardens surrounded Olympic-sized pools, and staff in crisp uniforms moved efficiently to attend to the wealthy guests. As the valet took our car, I straightened my shoulders and prepared to make the best impression possible. Harold and Margaret were already in the grand lobby when we arrived. Harold wore a pastel polo shirt and white linen pants, looking every bit the wealthy patriarch on vacation. Margaret had on a designer sundress and wide-brimmed hat, her diamonds catching the light as she air-kissed Jessica on both cheeks. "Darling, you look tired. Was the drive terrible?" Margaret asked Jessica, barely glancing in my direction. "Jessica, good to see you made it before dinner," Harold said, checking his watch. Then, as if just noticing me, he added, "Earl," with a curt nod. I extended my hand. "Great to see you both. Thank you for including us in the family vacation." Harold shook my hand briefly before turning back to Jessica. "Thomas and Audrey are already here, along with your cousins. Your Aunt Patricia is arriving tomorrow morning." The check-in process was smooth, with the resort staff clearly recognizing the Williams name. Our suite was spacious and elegant, with a balcony overlooking the ocean. As we unpacked, Jessica chatted excitedly about seeing her cousins and swimming in the ocean the next day. "This is going to be wonderful," she said, hanging her designer dresses in the closet. "Just try to relax and be yourself, Earl." I nodded, though I was already feeling the familiar tension that came with these family gatherings. "I am looking forward to getting to know everyone better," I said, trying to sound confident. The first dinner was scheduled at the resort's premier restaurant, the Atlantic. When we arrived, I saw the extended Williams family already gathered in a private section of the dining room. There were about 16 people in total, including Thomas and his wife Eliza, Audrey and her boyfriend Peter, Harold's sister Patricia and her husband George, and several cousins with their spouses. As we approached, Harold stood and made a show of welcoming Jessica. Then he turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Earl, we have a bit of a seating issue tonight. The family table is just for immediate family and those who have been coming to these gatherings for years. There is a lovely table just over there where you can sit." He gestured to a small table in the corner of the room, separated from the main family table by several feet. I stood frozen, not quite believing what I was hearing. "Dad, is that really necessary?" Jessica asked, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is just how we have always done things, dear," Margaret interjected smoothly. "New additions observe for the first few years. It is tradition." I looked at Jessica, waiting for her to object more strongly, but she merely gave me an apologetic smile before taking her seat between her mother and sister at the large family table. The conversation immediately picked up around her, as if I wasn't even there. In a daze, I made my way to the small corner table. A waiter approached with a confused expression, clearly wondering why I was sitting alone. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked. "Yes. Just a family tradition," I replied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. From my isolated position, I could see the entire Williams family enjoying their meal. They discussed family investments, shared inside jokes about previous vacations, and reminisced about people I had never met. Occasionally, someone would glance my way before quickly looking away. Jessica laughed along with her cousins and accepted a glass of wine from her brother. Only once did she look over at me with a brief smile before being pulled back into conversation by her aunt. I tried to focus on my meal, but each bite felt like sawdust in my mouth. The waiter continued to give me puzzled looks, probably assuming I must have done something terrible to be excluded. So obviously, as the evening wore on, I watched as Jessica became more animated with her family, seeming to forget I was even there. When dessert was served, Harold stood to make a toast about family traditions and the importance of their annual gatherings. He spoke about the special bond they all shared, looking around the table at each person except me. "To the Williams family," he concluded, raising his glass. "To family," they all echoed, while I sat alone with my untouched dessert. Later that night, in the privacy of our suite, I finally confronted Jessica. "What happened tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You let them put me at a separate table, like I was a stranger." Jessica sighed as she removed her earrings. "Earl, please do not make this a big deal. Dad just likes family traditions. The first few years are always like this for newcomers. Who else has ever been seated separately?" I challenged. She hesitated. "Well, Eliza went through it too." "For how many years?" "Just one," she admitted. "But her family has known ours for generations, so it was different." "Jessica, it was humiliating. I am your husband, not some random guest." She turned to face me, her expression hardening slightly. "This is just how my family does things. Can you please just accept it and not create drama? It is only for a week." I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Jessica's even breathing beside me. I thought about the years I had spent trying to be accepted by her family, all the compromises I had made, all the slights I had endured. For the first time, I wondered if anything would ever be enough. Morning came, and with it, the realization that the separate table had not been a one-time thing. At breakfast in the resort's sunlit dining room, Harold once again directed me to a small table, away from the family. This time, he did not even bother with an explanation, as I watched Jessica chatting happily with her mother and sister, not once looking in my direction. Something cold and hard settled in my stomach. This was going to be a very long week. The pattern established that first night continued relentlessly over the next 3 days. Every meal, every gathering, every planned activity included my physical presence, but excluded me from actual participation. I began to feel like a ghost haunting the edges of the Williams family vacation, visible but not acknowledged. On the second day, Harold organized a golf outing for the family at the resort's championship course. When we arrived at the clubhouse, he announced the foursomes with a practiced ease. "Thomas, you will play with me, George, and cousin William. Jessica, you will join your mother, Aunt Patricia, and Audrey. Peter and the other spouses will take the third group." I stood waiting for my assignment, golf clubs ready. Harold glanced at me with mild surprise, as if he had forgotten I was there. Earl, I believe there is a resort guest looking for a playing partner. James at the pro shop can set you up. And so I spent 4 hours playing golf with Martin, a retired dentist from Florida, while watching the Williams family groups ahead of us on the course, laughing and taking photos without me. The beach day was no different. The family had a private cabana area with lounge chairs arranged in a circle. As I approached with my towel and book, there was a noticeable pause in conversation. Earl, Margaret said with a tight smile, I believe there is a lovely spot just over there by the umbrella. The sun here might be too strong for you. The spot she indicated was a good 20 yards away from the family circle. Jessica caught my eye briefly. Before returning to her conversation with her cousin Amanda, I silently set up my chair in the designated area, feeling the divide between us growing wider with each passing hour. That afternoon, I tried to connect with Jessica's younger cousins, who seemed less entrenched in the family's exclusionary tactics. I joined a volleyball game they had started on the beach, and for a few minutes felt almost normal as we bumped the ball back and forth. Then Thomas called them away for a family photo by the water. Just Williams' family for this one, he said pointedly when I started to follow. Jessica stood with her arm around her mother, smiling for the camera, not objecting to my exclusion. After 3 days of this treatment, I began documenting everything. I discreetly took photos with my phone when I was seated at separate tables. I kept notes of conversations and specific instances of exclusion. Part of me didn't know what I would do with this evidence, but the act of recording it helped me maintain some sense of reality amid the gaslighting. On the evening of the 3rd day, I overheard a conversation that crystallized everything. I had stepped out onto the terrace outside the resort bar, seeking a moment of peace, when I heard Harold's voice from the adjacent seating area, partially hidden by decorative plants. He is just not our kind, Thomas, Harold was saying in a low voice. I do not understand what Jessica sees in him. No family connections, new money, if you can even call it that. At least he seems to know his place, Thomas replied with a chuckle. Sits at his little table without making a scene. Your mother is worried about their future. What kind of life can he provide for Jessica? And can you imagine if they have children? What kind of influence would he be? Speaking of influence, Thomas said, did you know Bradley Hampton is here at the resort? He asked about Jessica. My stomach clenched. Bradley Hampton was Jessica's ex-boyfriend, son of one of Harold's business associates, and the man everyone had expected Jessica to marry before she met me. Yes, Margaret ran into his mother at the spa, Harold replied. We have invited them to join us for dinner tomorrow. It will be good for Jessica to reconnect with appropriate people. That night, while Jessica was in the shower, I noticed her phone light up with a text notification. I had never been the type to snoop, but something compelled me to look. The message was from Bradley. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Just like old times. Jessica's response made my blood run cold. Cannot wait. Do not mention to Earl. When she emerged from the bathroom, I confronted her about the separate tables again, not revealing what I had overheard or seen. It has been 3 days, Jessica. This has gone beyond a tradition into deliberate humiliation. Your family is treating me like I do not exist. Jessica wrapped her hair in a towel, frustration evident on her face. It is just their way, Earl. Why can you not adapt? Why do you always have to make everything so difficult? Their way is to treat your husband like a second-class citizen? I asked incredulously. You knew who my family was when you married me. She snapped. If you cannot handle a few quirky traditions, that is your problem, not theirs. Her words hit me like a physical blow. It was not just her family. I was losing faith in it was Jessica herself. That night, after she fell asleep, I opened my laptop and began researching the Williams family businesses. Using my tech skills, I dug deeper than casual Googling would allow. What I found was interesting to say the least. Questionable financial practices in Harold's company, tax avoidance schemes that skirted legality, and several pending complaints from former employees about discrimination. I reached out to my own family for the first time since the vacation began. My parents had never been particularly impressed with Jessica or her family's wealth, seeing through the facade to the coldness beneath. My younger sister Amy had always been skeptical of how they treated me. "Earl, honey, this is not normal," my mother said when I called her late that night from the balcony of our suite. "Family does not treat family this way." "I know, Mom," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "I think I have been fooling myself for a long time." "What are you going to do?" she asked gently. "I do not know yet," I answered honestly. But I am done sitting at the separate table. As I ended the call and looked out at the moonlight reflecting on the ocean, I felt a strange sense of clarity beginning to form. For 5 years, I had been trying to earn a place at a table where I would never be welcome. Perhaps it was time to build my own table instead. The 4th day of our vacation brought Harold's 65th birthday celebration, an event that had been mentioned repeatedly as the centerpiece of the family gathering. The resort's grand ballroom had been transformed with elaborate floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers, and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Round tables draped in white linen surrounded a small dance floor, each setting gleaming with silver and fine china. I arrived with Jessica, who was wearing a blue silk dress that matched her eyes perfectly. She had been distant all day, spending the morning at the spa with her mother and aunt, then disappearing for family drinks before the main event. Now, as we entered the ballroom, her eyes scanned the room, and I noticed how she straightened her posture when she spotted Bradley Hampton and his parents near the bar. Harold approached us, champagne in hand, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. "Jessica, darling, you look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. Then, turning to me with a cool smile, "Earl, thank you for coming. Your table is over there." I followed his gesture and felt my heart sink. This time, I wasn't even being seated at a separate guest table. Instead, Harold had placed me at a small table near the service entrance, where the resort staff would be eating when they took their breaks. 2 servers were already sitting there, looking uncomfortable at my approach. "Harold," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "surely on your birthday I could join the family table? This arrangement has been planned for months," he replied smoothly. "The seating chart cannot be changed now." "I am sure you understand." Jessica squeezed my arm lightly. "It is just for dinner, Earl. I will find you for dancing later." Before I could respond, she was whisked away by her mother toward the main family table, where I noticed Bradley Hampton was now sitting in what should have been my place. I made my way to the assigned table, nodding politely to the servers who looked as though they wished to be anywhere else. "Sorry about this, sir." One of them, a young man named Marco, according to his name tag, whispered, "We can eat in the kitchen, if you prefer to be alone." "No," I said, suddenly determined not to show how deeply this cut. "Please stay. I would appreciate the company." Throughout the elaborate 5-course meal, I watched as the Williams family celebrated without me. Harold gave a speech thanking everyone for coming to this intimate family gathering, his emphasis on family unmistakable, as his eyes briefly met mine across the room. Thomas followed with a toast, champagne glass raised high, to my father, who has always understood the importance of surrounding himself with people who truly belong in our circle. "Your judgment of character has never failed you." Laughter rippled through the assembled guests, and I noticed several glances in my direction. Jessica, seated between her mother and Bradley, joined in the laughter, not once looking my way. The final humiliation came when the photographer gathered the family for portraits. I started to stand, but Audrey's voice carried clearly across the room. "Just family for these, please." I watched as Jessica posed with her parents, siblings, and extended family. Then, to my disbelief, Bradley was invited to join several of the photos, standing close to Jessica, with his hand lightly touching her back. The message could not have been clearer. Bradley belonged in these photos. I did not. As I returned to my seat, I heard a child's voice, Jessica's 7-year-old cousin Benjamin, asking loudly, "Why isn't Uncle Earl in the pictures? Isn't he family too?" Juan. On. His mother quickly shushed him, but the question hung in the air, innocent and damning. I maintained my composure throughout the evening, smiling politely when necessary, thanking the servers who shared their table with me for their kindness. At one point, an older gentleman I recognized as a business associate of Harold's approached my table. "Grant Thompson." He introduced himself, extending his hand. "I believe we met at Jessica's graduation party." "Earl Matthews," I replied, shaking his hand. "Nice to see you again." He glanced around before leaning closer. "I wanted to say, I admire your restraint tonight. Not many men would handle this situation with such dignity." "Thank you," I said, surprised by his comment. "I have known the Williams family for 30 years. He continued quietly. "They have always had a certain rigidity about who they accept. It is their loss, not yours." His words stayed with me as the evening progressed. Jessica never did find me for that dance, she promised. Instead, I watched as she moved around the room, charming and laughing, occasionally dancing with Bradley, while I remained at my isolated table. By 11, I had had enough and quietly left the ballroom. Back in our suite, I sat on the balcony watching the waves crash against the shore, a strange calm settling over me. When Jessica finally returned at nearly 1 in the morning, her cheeks flushed from champagne and dancing, I was waiting. "Did you enjoy abandoning me all night?" I asked quietly. She sighed dramatically, kicking off her heels. "Please do not start, Earl. It was Dad's birthday. I had responsibilities as his daughter. And what about your responsibilities as my wife? You could have mingled, talked to people," she said dismissively. "No one forced you to sit at that table all night. Your father did exactly that," I pointed out. "And you let him. Just like you have let him and your entire family treat me like an unwelcome intruder for 5 years. Jessica turned to face me, her expression hardening. "What do you want from me, Earl? You knew who my family was when you married me. You knew where I came from. What was expected? I expected my wife to stand by me, to be a partner," I replied. "I expected basic respect from the family I married into. They have their ways," she said, the familiar refrain that had become her excuse for everything. "If you had just tried harder to fit in, to understand our traditions, like the tradition of inviting your ex-boyfriend to your father's birthday and not telling me, like the tradition of texting him behind my back." Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Bradley is a family friend. It would have been rude not to include him." I stood up then, a strange sense of peace washing over me. "I have a question for you, Jessica. If you had to choose between me and your family's approval, which would you pick?" She did not answer immediately, which was an answer in itself. "That is what I thought," I said with a small smile. "Perfect. I have my own way too. What is that supposed to mean?" she asked, confusion mingling with irritation in her voice. "It means I am done trying to earn a place at a table where I will never be welcome." "You are being dramatic," she said, turning away to remove her earrings. "Get some sleep. Things will look better in the morning." As she disappeared into the bathroom, I looked around the luxurious suite that represented everything I had been trying to fit into for 5 years. Jessica was right about one thing: tomorrow would indeed look different, but not in the way she imagined. I spent the night making calls, sending emails, and organizing resources, all while Jessica slept peacefully beside me, unaware that by sunrise, everything would change. I woke before dawn, the first hints of sunlight just beginning to color the horizon. Jessica was still asleep, her golden hair spread across the pillow, looking deceptively innocent. I slipped quietly from the bed and took my laptop to the balcony, ready to put my plan into action. My first call was to Michael Donovan, a sharp divorce attorney I had worked with on a legal software project last year. Despite the early hour, he answered on the third ring. "Earl? Everything okay? I need to initiate divorce proceedings," I said quietly, watching the sunrise. "Today." To his credit, Michael did not ask unnecessary questions. "Send me an email with the details. I will have preliminary paperwork ready by noon." "Are you somewhere safe?" "For now," I replied. "I need to protect my assets. Do not transfer anything yet," he cautioned. "But change your passwords and notify your bank of potential unauthorized access attempts." My next call was to Sarah Chen, my financial advisor. I explained the situation briefly and asked her to secure my accounts and investments. "I will put a freeze on your joint accounts and transfer your personal funds to the secure account we set up last year," she assured me. "What about the condo? It is in my name only," I reminded her. Jessica insisted on keeping her Beacon Hill apartment in her name, so we never combined that property. While Jessica continued sleeping, I compiled and organized all the evidence I had gathered throughout the vacation photos of the separate tables, screenshots of text messages, notes on specific incidents, and recordings of several conversations where family members had made disparaging remarks. I encrypted this file and sent it to Michael with a detailed timeline. By 7:30, I had contacted the resort's management and arranged for a separate suite, the presidential one, ironically available. Because a last-minute cancellation, I paid for it with my personal credit card, adding a generous tip to ensure absolute discretion. "Of course, Mr. Matthews," the manager assured me. "We can have your belongings moved while you are at breakfast. The new key cards will be waiting at the front desk under the name Grant, as you requested." Next, I made my way to the hotel business center, where I printed several documents I had prepared overnight. One was a detailed account of how Harold's company had been systematically avoiding resort taxes by misclassifying their corporate retreats as charitable events, a scheme I had accidentally discovered through a careless comment from Thomas the previous day. I scheduled a meeting with the resort manager for later that morning, where I would anonymously provide this information. As a concerned employee, the resort had been losing tens of thousands in tax revenue due to this scheme. At 8, I called my travel agent and canceled the joint return tickets Jessica and I had booked, replacing mine with a solo first-class flight leaving that evening. I also arranged for a private car service to take me to the airport, bypassing the need to travel with the Williams family. With these practical matters handled, I turned to the more strategic aspects of my plan. I typed a simple text message to Jessica, scheduling it to send at precisely 10:30 a.m., when the family would be gathered for brunch. Living by my way now. Enjoy the family vacation. Jessica had mentioned several times that she had used her position at her marketing firm to secure special pricing for her father's company events. This was a clear violation of her employment contract, which I had reviewed when she asked me to look over the document before she signed it. I drafted a carefully worded email to Jessica's boss, Amanda Reyes, who happened to be a former client of mine, outlining these ethical concerns. While I had no desire to destroy Jessica's career, I felt her boss deserved to know about these conflicts of interest. I scheduled this email to send later in the day, giving me time to be well away before the fallout began. The most satisfying email to draft was to Jacob Martinez, a business journalist who had been investigating financial improprieties in family-owned investment firms. I had met him at a tech conference last year, and we had stayed in touch. My anonymous tip included enough verifiable information about Harold's questionable practices to give Jacob a solid starting point for an investigation, without directly implicating myself as the source. I also prepared a package of documents for Margaret's brothers, who jointly controlled the family trust with her. These documents detailed several instances where Margaret had violated trust protocols by diverting funds to pet projects without proper authorization. Another piece of information I had stumbled upon while researching the family's businesses. By 9, I had contacted Jessica's cousin Claire, who had been cut off from the family 3 years ago. After choosing to marry a woman instead of the man Harold had selected for her, I had always liked Claire and had kept in touch secretly after her exile from the family. Now, I shared with her some of the information I had gathered, particularly the parts relating to the family trust, of which she was still legally a beneficiary, though Margaret had been withholding her distributions. "This is enough for my lawyer to finally take action," Claire said, her voice tight with emotion. "Thank you, Earl. I always knew you were too good for them." My final strategic move was to set up meetings with 3 of Harold's biggest business competitors for the following week. As a software engineer specializing in financial systems, I had insights into the technological vulnerabilities of Harold's outdated infrastructure insights that would be valuable to his rivals without crossing any legal or ethical lines. As I completed these arrangements, I felt a strange sense of lightness. For 5 years, I had diminished myself trying to fit into the Williams family mold. Now, standing on the balcony watching the morning sunlight spread across the ocean, I felt like myself again for the first time in years. At 9:30, I returned to our suite to find Jessica just waking up. She stretched lazily, unaware of the seismic shifts that had occurred while she slept. "You are up early," she murmured, reaching for her phone. "Have you ordered coffee?" "No," I replied simply, gathering my toiletries from the bathroom. "I have been busy." She was still scrolling through her phone, not really paying attention. "Brunch is at 10:30. Mom wants to discuss the plan for the yacht trip tomorrow." I did not respond, simply continued collecting my essential items and placing them in my carry-on bag. It wasn't until I took my suits from the closet that Jessica finally looked up. "What are you doing?" she asked, confusion clouding her face. "Living by my way," I replied calmly. "Enjoy your brunch." Before she could respond, I walked out of the suite, closing the door quietly behind me. At the front desk, I collected the key cards for my new suite under the name Grant and made my way to the presidential suite on the top floor of the resort. The new accommodations were breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, a private terrace with a hot tub, and a dining room where I could order meals in private. As I settled into my new space, I felt the resort staff's attitude toward me shift subtly. Word had gotten around about how the Williams family had treated me, and now that I had the most exclusive suite in the resort, there was a new respect in their interactions. Marco, the server who had shared his table with me the previous night, was now assigned as my personal concierge. "Anything you need, Mr. Matthews, day or night," he assured me. "It is my pleasure to assist you." At exactly 10:30, as the Williams family would be gathering for brunch, my scheduled text to Jessica sent. I imagined her phone buzzing at the family table, her confusion turning to alarm as she processed my simple message. "Living by my way now. Enjoy the family vacation." By 11, my transformation was complete. I was no longer the unwanted addition to the Williams family vacation. I was Earl Matthews, successful software engineer, valued client of the Ocean View Resort, and a man who had finally reclaimed his dignity. The Williams family response began exactly as I had anticipated. At 10:32 a.m., my phone lit up with the first of what would become a barrage of messages from Jessica. "What does this mean? Where are you? Earl, answer your phone right now. Are you seriously doing this during my father's birthday trip? Mom is upset. You need to stop this childish behavior." I silenced my phone and enjoyed a peaceful brunch on my private terrace, watching seagulls wheel above the ocean and savoring each bite of my meal. For the first time in days, I could eat without feeling the weight of judgmental stares. At 11:15 a.m., the resort manager called to inform me that a Mrs. Matthews was at the front desk demanding information about my whereabouts. "We have maintained your privacy as requested, sir," he assured me. We simply informed her that we cannot discuss the arrangements of other guests. "Thank you," I replied. "I appreciate your discretion." By noon, the situation had escalated dramatically. My scheduled emails had begun their work, creating precisely the kind of chaos I had envisioned. Jessica's calls became increasingly frantic, now interspersed with messages from Harold, Margaret, and even Thomas. From Harold: "This behavior is completely unacceptable. Return to the family immediately to discuss this like adults." From Margaret: "Jessica is distraught. Is that what you wanted? To ruin our family vacation?" From Thomas: "Whatever stunt you are pulling, it will not end well for you. My father has connections you cannot imagine." I did not respond to any of these messages. Instead, meeting with my divorce attorney via video call to review the preliminary paperwork he had prepared. Michael had done excellent work, ensuring that my interests were protected while keeping the proceedings fair. "The documentation you provided about their treatment of you will be very helpful if they try to paint you as the villain," he noted. "Do you want me to serve her with papers here at the resort?" "No," I decided. "Wait until we are back in Boston. I do not want to create a public scene." At 1:30 p.m., Harold received the call I had been waiting for. Through Marco, who had friends working throughout the resort, I learned that Harold had been summoned to an urgent meeting with his business partner regarding questions from a financial journalist about certain tax arrangements. The look on Harold's face as he rushed from the pool area was described to me as thunderous. Almost simultaneously, Margaret checked her phone to find missed calls from both her brothers, who had received my anonymous package of documents regarding the family trust violations. According to Marco, she went white as a ghost before hurrying away to return the calls in private. The real panic began at 3 p.m. when Thomas received notification that screenshots of certain text messages discussing insider trading had been anonymously submitted to his firm's ethics committee. I had discovered these messages accidentally while documenting the family's mistreatment of me, when Thomas had carelessly left his phone unlocked at the pool. By late afternoon, the Williams family was in full crisis mode. Through the resort grapevine, I learned they had convened an emergency meeting in Harold's suite, with raised voices audible from the hallway. Jessica was reportedly hysterical, demanding to know how I could have accessed so much sensitive information. At 4:45 p.m., Jessica finally located me. The front desk had maintained my privacy, but she had apparently bribed a junior staff member to reveal my new location. When the knock came at my door, I was prepared. Jessica stood in the hallway, her perfect appearance now distinctly disheveled. Behind her stood Harold, Margaret, Thomas, and Audrey, a unified family front. "Earl," Jessica began, her voice trembling. "What have you done?" I leaned against the doorframe, blocking their entry. "I have decided to live by my way, just as your family lives by theirs." Harold stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You had no right to access private family information. We will pursue legal action for this breach of privacy." "I accessed nothing that wasn't openly discussed in my presence," I replied calmly. "Perhaps if you hadn't treated me as invisible, you would have been more careful about what you said around me." 2 resort security officers appeared in the hallway behind the Williams family. "Is everything all right, Mr. Matthews?" one asked. "These guests were just leaving," I replied. "They are not welcome in my suite." "This is ridiculous," Margaret hissed. "We are family." "No," I corrected her. "According to your own words and actions, I am not family. I am simply the man who was foolish enough to think he could earn a place at your table." The security officers moved closer. "Sir, ma'am, we need to ask you to return to your own accommodations." Thomas stepped forward aggressively. "Do you know who we are? We have been coming to this resort for 20 years. and reportedly avoiding proper resort taxes for most of that time. I added quietly, watching Thomas's face pale. The Williams family retreated, all except Jessica, who managed to slip past security into my suite before they could stop her. Once we were alone, her demeanor changed completely. Tears filled her eyes as she approached me. "Earl, baby, I do not understand why you are doing this," she said, reaching for my hand. "Whatever upset you, we can fix it. Come back to our suite, and we can talk this through." I gently removed my hand from hers. "There is nothing to fix, Jessica. Your family made it clear I do not belong at their table, and you made it clear where your loyalty lies. That is not fair," she protested. "I have always been caught in the middle." "No," I corrected her. "You chose a side every time you let them treat me like I was nothing. Every time you dismissed my feelings as being too sensitive. Every time you expected me to accept humiliation as tradition." "I love you," she whispered, tears now streaming down her face. "Perhaps you do. In your way," I acknowledged. "But not enough to stand up for me. Not enough to choose me." "What do you want?" she asked desperately. "Tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it." "I wanted a wife who would be my partner," I said simply. "You chose your table. I am choosing mine." As security escorted Jessica from my suite, my phone buzzed with breaking news alerts. A preliminary investigation into Williams Investment Group had been announced, sending the company's stock into an immediate decline. The first domino had fallen. Over the next few hours, I watched from my terrace as the Williams family's carefully constructed world began to fracture. Harold spent hours on his phone, pacing furiously. Margaret huddled with Audrey, both looking tense and drawn. Thomas made a show of confidence, but kept checking his phone obsessively. Most revealing was watching the extended family dynamics shift. Cousins, who had always followed Harold's lead, began to distance themselves, gathering in separate groups to whisper concerns. Jessica's Aunt Patricia was overheard questioning Harold's judgment. Several family members were seen leaving dinner early, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. As the sun set on what had been a transformative day, I packed my remaining belongings and prepared for my evening flight. The private car I had arranged waited discreetly at the resort's side entrance. As I settled into the back seat, I took one last look at the Ocean View Resort, where I had arrived days earlier, hoping for acceptance, and was leaving, having found something far more valuable: self-respect. My return to Boston marked the beginning of a new chapter. Walking into my Cambridge condo that night, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The space that Jessica and I had shared now seemed both empty and full of possibility. I spent that first weekend methodically removing her remaining belongings from my closets and drawers, boxing them neatly for her to collect. The divorce proceedings went more smoothly than I had anticipated. The evidence I had gathered of the Williams family's treatment of me, combined with Jessica's text exchanges with Bradley, made it difficult for her to contest our separation. Michael handled everything professionally, ensuring a fair distribution of our assets without the public spectacle the Williams family so desperately wanted to avoid. "They were hoping you would get angry, make accusations, give them ammunition to paint you as unstable," Michael explained during one of our meetings. "Your calm, methodical approach has completely disarmed them. In those first weeks alone, I reconnected with parts of myself I had gradually surrendered during my marriage. I resumed my Sunday basketball games with college friends, a ritual Jessica had discouraged as unprofessional. I redecorated my living space, replacing the formal, uncomfortable furniture Margaret had selected with pieces that actually reflected my taste. I even adopted a rescue dog, something Jessica had always opposed due to potential damage to our hardwood floors. The professional consequences for the Williams family unfolded gradually but inexorably. Harold's company faced a serious SEC investigation, triggered by the anonymous tips I had provided to Jacob Martinez. While careful not to cross any legal lines, I had given the journalist enough verifiable information to start pulling on threads that eventually unraveled years of questionable practices. Thomas was placed on administrative leave from his investment firm, pending an internal ethics investigation. Audrey lost several key clients who did not want to be associated with the emerging scandal. The family's social standing, built on generations of carefully cultivated connections, began to erode as former friends and associates distanced themselves from potential legal complications. Jessica's own professional situation became complicated when her boss discovered her misuse of company resources to benefit her father's business. Amanda Reyes, true to her reputation for ethical leadership, did not fire Jessica, but reassigned her to a position with less authority and stricter oversight. My support during this transition came from unexpected sources. Jessica's cousin Claire became a steadfast friend. Having successfully used the information I provided to challenge her exclusion from family trust distributions, she and her wife Maria often invited me for dinner, offering perspective and laughter when the divorce process became particularly challenging. Grant Thompson, the gentleman who had approached me at Harold's birthday dinner, reached out to offer me a position at his technology firm. "I could use someone with your integrity and skills," he said during our lunch meeting. And frankly, anyone who can stand up to Harold Williams has the kind of backbone I want in a leadership team. Most significantly, I reconnected with my own family. My parents, who had always been kept at a distance by Jessica's subtle disdain, welcomed me back into their warm, unpretentious fold, without recrimination, or "I told you so." My sister Amy flew in from Chicago to spend a week helping me reorganize my life, filling my refrigerator with home-cooked meals, and my evenings with honest conversation. "You disappeared into their world," she observed one night as we shared pizza. On my new, comfortable sofa, it was like watching someone slowly erase themselves. She was right. Looking back, I could see how I had gradually compromised more and more of myself in pursuit of acceptance that was never going to come. I had mistaken Jessica's attraction to my differentness for a true appreciation of who I was, not realizing that she had always expected me to eventually transform into someone who would fit her family's mold. 3 months after the Hamptons vacation, I received a letter from Jessica, a handwritten note on expensive stationery, delivered to my office rather than my home. "I realize now what I lost," she wrote. "Not just a husband, but the only person who ever loved me for myself, rather than for my family name. I am sorry for every time I failed to stand up for you, for every time I chose my family's approval over your feelings. By the time I understood what really mattered, you were already gone." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, feeling neither triumph nor bitterness, just a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter closed. That evening, I met Sophia Harris for coffee, a data scientist I had met through a professional networking event. Our conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from algorithm ethics to our shared love of 1,980 seconds science fiction films. When she mentioned her strained relationship with her overbearing father, I found myself sharing parts of my own story. "How do you not feel bitter about it all?" she asked, her dark eyes curious and engaged. "I learned that there is a difference between being welcomed and being valued," I explained. I was trying to be welcomed into a family that was incapable of truly valuing me. Once I understood that, I could stop taking their rejection personally. As the months passed, my life developed a new rhythm. I accepted Grant's job offer, taking on the challenge of building his company's security infrastructure. I maintained my friendship with Claire and Maria, gradually meeting other people who had been pushed out of the Williams orbit for various inadequacies. I continued seeing Sophia, appreciating her directness and the ease of being with someone who saw and accepted me completely. The final Williams family drama played out largely without my participation. Harold's company underwent restructuring after the investigation revealed substantial improprieties. Margaret's brothers took control of the family trust, instituting new oversight measures. Several family members, including Audrey and 2 cousins, broke ranks entirely, giving interviews that portrayed Harold as controlling and manipulative. Jessica eventually relocated to Chicago, taking a position with a smaller marketing firm far from her family's influence. We had no contact beyond the necessary legal communications, though I occasionally heard updates through Claire. She had apparently declined to reunite with Bradley Hampton, whose family had also distanced themselves from the Williams amid the scandals. 1 year after that fateful Hamptons vacation, I found myself on a different beach, this time with my parents, sister, and a few close friends, celebrating my 36th birthday. As I watched the sunset with Sophia beside me and my rescue dog Cooper playing in the surf, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I had learned that true self-respect means establishing boundaries and maintaining them, even when it is painful. I had discovered that loneliness within a relationship is far more corrosive than being alone but authentic. Most importantly, I had come to understand that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who cannot see your worth. The Williams family had their way of doing things, a closed circle that admitted only those who fit their narrow definition of belonging. I had my own way now. A life built on genuine connections, mutual respect, and the freedom to be fully myself. As the stars began to appear above the ocean, I felt a deep sense of peace. The table I had built for myself might be simpler than the elaborate Williams family table, but everyone seated at it had chosen to be there, and no one was relegated to the corner. What did you think of this story? Has anyone ever made you feel like you did not belong? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your experiences in the comments. Friends, if this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about finding your self-worth and standing up for yourself. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact. Thank you for listening, and remember, you always deserve a seat at the table.